Hello everyone, Grimm here. Thank you very much for coming by to listen to this video. Please like and subscribe if you like what you're about to hear. In the meantime, sit back, relax and enjoy. I live in South GA, so things here can be really shady. I go to this Walmart all the time and I've never had any problems with it whatsoever. I'm a 21-year-old male, so it's kind of weird that I was followed anywhere, but here we go. I went shopping for groceries, doing my usual thing. It was around 8:30 p.m. by the time I got done checking out. As I was walking out of the store, I noticed this older gentleman staring at me, all creepy-like. I just brushed it off until I noticed he was out in the parking lot, just staring as I was putting my groceries in the car. I decided to kinda hurry up my pace. I mean, I can defend myself, I'm a pretty muscular guy, but I really don't like violence that much. I get in my car and drive away. I thought that was that. I get about a mile down the road when this black pickup starts riding on my bumper. I slowed down and went off the road a little to let him pass, but he didn't. He just kept pace. So finally, I gave up and brake checked him. And he passes. But as he was doing that, I noticed that it was the same old man. When he passed me, he brake checked me and tried to make me stop my car. This went on for about 10 minutes until I got very aggravated and passed him and sped off. I finally get home and go inside and start to chill when my Ring camera goes off. I look at the video and from my phone, it's this dude. He's on my porch. I called the cops. They came, but he was gone, so there was nothing I could do. This happened last night, and to be honest, I'm kinda creeped out about it. I just thought I'd give it a share and see what everyone else thought. I'm sorry for the formatting in advance. I'm on my mobile, and I have to add, English isn't my first language, so I'm not overly good at it. This happened just half an hour ago or so, and I'm still a bit shaken up. I was on my way home from my parents, and only like 15 minutes away from my apartment. My parents live about 30 minutes away from me, when I noticed a silver car behind me. I have no idea why, but for some reason it stood out to me. It had a local license plate though, so I didn't think much of it. Skip ahead 10 minutes and the person, who looks to be a man in his 20s, is still behind me when I drive into the town that I currently live in. I'm starting to get a bit weirded out at this point. To be fair, I'm always paranoid about people following me, but again, his license plate is local, so maybe he just lives the same way as I do in town. He always keeps the same distance though. At one point, I was driving 70 in a 50. I'm from Europe, so that's in kilometers per hour, because I wanted to see if he would do so as well. And lo and behold, he matches my speed. I take a right and I'm on the home stretch to my apartment, maybe 800 meters away. The guy is still following me. So I have a thought. At the end of the street, which is just past my apartment, I could take a left and basically go in a big circle, coming back to the apartment where I took the right turn before. If he stops before I take the left, he just happens to live near me, and I could calm down. However, if he follows me, well, I would be terrified. I drive past my apartment, guy still behind me, get to the end of the road and take a left, he follows. I take the next turn, like I planned, and he's still behind me. I become absolutely horrified and call my boyfriend so that I can talk to someone, not wanting to call the police right away. Maybe he saw me calling someone while driving, or maybe he realized I was onto him, or maybe I was just paranoid the whole time, but he suddenly stops and drives into a parking spot. I keep driving, park my car close to my apartment, grab my stuff, and power walk to the entry of the door. all the while still having my boyfriend on the phone just to be safe. I honestly don't know if I was being paranoid or if he was even following me, but I am kind of scared of tomorrow because I'm going to have to walk to my car alone, which the guy can probably imagine is close to my apartment. If anyone has any recommendations for me or can calm me down, it would be greatly appreciated. This scene happened when I was 21 years old. It is in a smaller town outside of a huge city in the Midwest. This was 1981. I worked as a fast food restaurant server and it stayed open until about 3 a.m. My then husband worked for a bowling alley as a manager, and he was never off before 2 a.m. I was expecting my first child at the time, and business was slow, so I was sent home at about 1 a.m. In the town we lived in, there was a large private girls' college. Women were being warned to lock their car doors because two males were still on the loose that were targeting women around my age. They were sometimes following them home and attacking or forcing women alone late at night off the road. The men were raping and killing the women. They had killed 3 women by this point, and 2 of the women were found on a deserted road and 1 in her apartment. There was no description of these men or what kind of vehicle they drove. I left work, climbed into my car, locked my doors, and started for home. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and my gut feeling told me that something was very wrong. I figured out that I was being followed home. I took several turns around town trying to shake this car, but to no avail. The advice given was that if you ever thought you were being followed, to drive to the police station. We had recently moved to this area, so I had no idea where the police station was. I was terrified, panicked, and couldn't think about what to do. This was in the days where no cell phones existed, but payphones were made in different areas where you could drive up to them, sit in your car's driver's seat and put your window down, pay the phone, and use it as it had a long cord which enabled you to stay in your car and talk. You still had to deposit the money in order to talk, even if you were calling 911. I thought briefly about trying to get one of these phones, but I was too scared and didn't think I could have a coin ready in time before those men could have approached me. My parents lived about 4 streets from where I lived, and I decided the safest decision was to try to make it to my parents' house. I was still being followed when I got to my parents' home. There is a short block that you could go around by my parents, and I went around this block about 3 times, and every time I'd honk the horn. You would have thought laying on the horn would have discouraged these creeps from continuing to follow me, but it had no effect. If anything, they moved closer behind me. I pulled into their driveway, and these creepers pulled right in behind me, turning their lights off, and I heard their doors open and shut. I was beyond terrified at this point, and they were out of their cars. One came up to the side and one to the other. My parents' house was a split level, and you pulled up in front of a double-car garage. In order to get into the house, you had to go through the garage door or front door, and the front door was to the left of the driveway, about 2 cars' length away, plus a set of steps. I laid on the horn again, and they kept coming. My dad, who is a retired military, oftentimes stayed up late at night watching TV, and thank God he did this time. All of a sudden, he turned the porch light on and burst out of the front door. He assessed the situation instantly and started yelling at these creeps to get the heck away from my car, all while barreling down the steps towards them. At first, they didn't retreat very fast, but must have thought better. My dad is very big-boned, about 6'4". He had a brother that played in college football and wore size 15 EEE shoes. He made it to the front of their car and pounded on the hood before they were able to burn rubber and reversing out of the driveway. While he was unable to get a license number because they didn't have a front plate, he was able to describe them and give a make and model to the police. The police told me how fortunate I was that my dad realized the dire situation that I was in. I still get chills thinking back to that night. I remember it as if it were yesterday. My dad said he thought he heard a car honk more than once. Then he heard me in the driveway. He had just shut off the TV and was heading for bed when I pulled in. And thank God my dad acted so quickly, or I might not be writing this today. This incident has caused me to be hyper aware of my surroundings and never turn into my driveway without making sure I'm not followed. Always, always be mindful of where you are. And don't walk around with your headphones on or your phone pressed to your ear. You never know when you may be an opportunist moment for someone with ill intentions. Make sure you know where your local police station is. And if you ever get chills, like something is wrong, make sure you drive into the police station. The police are more than happy to help you out and be better safe than sorry. The police did capture these two creeps about 2 weeks later, and they didn't get a fourth victim. They were both on probation for kidnapping and rape, served their time, and decided killing their victims left no witnesses. My father is still my hero to this day. His quick actions prevented me from being the fourth victim. And for those wondering, the car, model, and make of the car that my dad described to the police was the description of what they were in when they were arrested. I used to live in an apartment a few blocks from the beach off one of the main streets in a beachside city in California. A new whiskey bar opened up downtown, and my neighbor's daughter invited me to go check it out. We had a great time, maybe a little too great a time, and at around 2 in the morning, decided to go home. We weren't wasted, but all three of us were definitely drunk. I requested to walk home since we were only around 1.5 miles away and I was feeling dizzy. Probably a bit too dizzy to take an Uber. Also, it was fairly easy to get home as we only had to walk a block up from where we were to be back on the main thoroughfare that we lived on. The entire walk home was well lit along a busy thoroughfare with cars passing regularly, even at 2 a.m. My friends agreed to walk home as they were both also feeling a bit tipsy, and we all felt the walk could help us sober up. We are now walking along, laughing, and about halfway home when one of my friends quietly says to stay calm and don't look, but there's someone following us. We immediately shut up and kept walking. My friend quietly tells us that he has been following us for the last few minutes. She has been waiting to tell us anything because she wasn't certain if he was following us. A few minutes later, and we were all 100% sure that this guy has been following us, and we will be back to my apartment soon. The entire time the creepster is following us, he maintains the same distance, about 100 feet back. We can't see him enough to identify what he looks like, and we were afraid to call the cops because we weren't sure what to do if he thinks he sees us calling the cops, right? The cops wouldn't have enough time to show up and find this guy that we can't identify. We're almost at my apartment and discuss our options. We know we don't want to lead this guy back to where I live. He may decide at a later date to come back. Calling the police is still out of the question because he's still near enough to see what we're doing. Everybody is asleep and my friends don't live there and still have to get back to their own car so that they can get home. We decide to keep walking past my apartment and turn onto a side street going down the opposite block to mine. As soon as we know that we're out of the sight of the creepster, we bolt around the next corner and take off running as fast as we can so we can get as far in the street as we can. Our intent was to loop back to my apartment without the creep seeing us. At this point, we don't know if he saw what street we went down. We wanted to make sure that he wasn't still on the main street, so we ducked behind a car towards the end of the street. where we are and wait. Maybe about 30 seconds go by and I pop up to check the end of the street from the direction we came from. Sure enough, the creep is at the end of the street looking around to see where we went, and he seems out of breath from running. Thankfully, he doesn't see me, and I tell my friends as we take off running down the end of the street and around the block, as we are now near enough to my apartment that we can run in and the man won't have enough time to catch up to see where we went. Shaking and terrified, we collapsed into my couches and waited an hour or two to make sure the guy would truly be gone before my friends left and went home. We felt very fortunate that our friend caught the guy following us as soon as she did it. It was really scary to know that the cops wouldn't have gotten there in time and that a lone man was willing to take all three of us on at once. We didn't call them out for following us because we figured anyone crazy enough to follow three chicks at one time was probably up to no good and was not going to be worried about us noticing. We felt very fortunate that nothing happened to us that night. And edit. Just for those who are wondering, I did offer for my friends to stay on the couch, but they wanted to go home and sleep in their own beds. As we are all sober by the time they left, I didn't push them to stay. Friends don't let friends drink and drive. This happened around sophomore year of high school in Washington. I was about 15. My house was a half a mile from the school, so normally I walked home and stopped off at my dad's auto shop to see if he wanted lunch or anything from the house, as I enjoyed walking around the town with friends and didn't mind taking detours if it wasn't a rainy day or snowing. One day as I was walking home from school, I noticed a man in a hoodie fall into a step behind me. Since I was on the main street and there were a bunch of buildings around me, I paid no attention to it and figured that he was just going in the same direction to a particular store. I went back to my music and texted my dad, letting him know that I was a block or two away from home, like always. A couple of minutes go by and I realized that this guy was still behind me. By this point, we were on the outskirts of town and there were seldom businesses and houses, so it was getting unlikely that he lived near me, as I was a solitary house on a corner property. To test my theory, I suddenly stopped and began texting my dad my suspicions and the description of the guy just in case. The dude noticed that I was taking notes of him and hot-footed it back the way he came towards town. I waited until he was around the corner and booked it another 20 feet to the nearest house and hid behind it for a few minutes, so it would appear that I had just vanished if he turned around to follow at a distance. I waited a good 10 minutes and then peeked around the corner to check if he was there. Nothing. So I headed back to my house. This was the beginning of summer, so it was rather warm out. I went swimming at our pool when I got home. Now, side note, I developed rather early and have had a large bust by the time that I was a freshman, and since I was an athlete, I was rather toned and quite slim. Swimming is how I kept my figure and muscle mass. I did 30 laps a day at our local Y to keep my endurance high. During my enjoyment swim, as I waited for my brothers to get home, all our military men now, I noticed a truck on the side of the road by my house. It wasn't running, and there was a guy facing me with his phone out towards me. Remembering the creep that followed me, I immediately got out and covered myself with a towel and called my dad. My dad is ex-military. He was a tanker and a sergeant for the army for over 20 years, and he was very protective of my mum, my sister, and me. 2 minutes after I call, I see his black truck come flying down the road and damn near drift into the side road, pulling up behind the truck. He gets out and starts asking questions like, "Who are you? Why are you outside my house? Why are you staring at my teenage daughter?" etc. The dude panics and starts saying his truck won't start and that he didn't know what to do, and he was trying to work up the nerve to ask me for help because I was the only one around. Being a mechanic, my dad offers to help fix the issue and get him the hell away from me and the house. And wouldn't you know, the truck starts right up. Like magic, huh? My dad got very quiet, which is usually a bad sign, and asked to see his pictures, and then proceeded to delete 15 or so pictures that he took of me and the house. Told him he was taking a picture of his plate and his ID. Showed me a pic of the ID, and it was the same guy who followed me earlier. He reported him to the police for photographing a minor without consent. He was arrested a few days later, and it was discovered that I wasn't the only person he did this to. He had pictures of at least 3 other girls from the high school at their homes. He was put onto the offenders list and forced to move out of town because the parents of the girls wanted to lynch him for being a predator. I was watching YouTube videos about this subreddit, and I realized that I have a perfect story for it. This happened about a week ago. So I had biked to school with my best friend. We were going to stay after school to work on a project together anyway, so it worked out. Our bike ride home from school, we decided to not go straight home and that we wanted to go on a small bike ride down a path by the park that will lead us back to my house anyways. When we were unchaining our bikes from the bike racks, I noticed a red Dodge across from the school. Just an FYI, we live in a pretty small town, so most of the kids who get picked up, we know what cars they get into and what cars hang around the school at pickup time, as well as what cars our teachers and fellow students drive. Or in the least, we have somewhat of an idea. But I usually didn't see this one, and it was probably like an hour and a half past the time school got out, but it could have been someone's relative picking them up or whatever, so I really didn't think much of it. We start biking towards our path, and after about 5 minutes, my friend told me the red truck was driving on the road next to the sidewalk that we were biking on, but it was a little behind us. I told her that it's probably fine and a coincidence, and that they probably are going home or live around here. So we keep going, but he didn't stop. After about 10 more minutes of him still following us, I then started getting a little bit more nervous and concerned. We ended up continuing until we got into a gas station because at least there would be people around us and less of a chance of something happening. So we parked our bikes and went in. We grabbed drinks and a snack to make it look like there was nothing odd about us going in there, but while we were there, I called my brother to come get us, and that there was somebody following us. He told us he would be right there and to just stay inside, so we did. We paid for our snacks and told the cashier about it, and she let us just sit there until my brother came. My brother pulled in, and so we walked out to get our bikes. When we couldn't find them, we looked around and saw the red truck pulled behind the gas station with our bikes right next to it. The man that was driving it was looking right at us. We went and told my brother. He said forget about the bikes and get in the car, so we did. My brother got out of the car and went to the gas station to get an employee, and while he was doing it, the man sped off out the back of the parking lot of the gas station. When my brother came out, he said that the gas station worker was going to check back on the cameras and see if she can get a license plate to give to the police, and that my brother gave her my mum's information for any updates. We both made it home safe. I'll keep you updated when we find something more out. Also, I'm sorry if there are grammar mistakes. I'm not a professional writer. Hi all. I have a tale about one of the times I was followed home from work. It's not too crazy, but it's still an interesting story. At least, I think so. This was about 7 to 8 years ago. I attended a large university where I bartended at the college bars. Let me preface that I am a very tall female. Where my first 2 years attending at the university, I played a Division 1 sport, so I'm not your typical easy female target when it comes to size. I had lived 3 streets back with my boyfriend at the time. He worked security at the same bar. Even if he wasn't working, usually he would wake up to walk me home, as I would get off my shift at around 3 a.m. The walk maybe took about 4 minutes, so it's not that far. On this particular night, he had an exam the next morning, so I told him that I'll have another security guard walk me home. The bar ended up being really dead that night, and the manager ended up cutting all the security staff. Like I said earlier, I usually wasn't afraid to walk by myself because I'm pretty tall, if not taller than a lot of men. I decided that I would let my boyfriend sleep and just make the quick 4-minute walk home at around 2:30. I started walking, and behind me I heard a car go really slow. The particular street I was walking on didn't have a sidewalk, so I was in the road and moved over to the grass. When I looked behind me, the car sped up and turned onto a street further down. About 20 seconds later, I hear another car behind me, and it's the same car. This time I pick up the pace and turn down the street and act like I'm walking to an apartment that actually wasn't mine. The car takes a quick right on the street that I was on, parks it, and the guy gets out of his car. At this point I start jogging, and the guy acts like he is stretching, putting his arm over another, then switching. I think he was just trying to throw me off. I keep jogging down the street to the end, as I'm only about 2 minutes away from my apartment at this point. The guy gets back into his car and circles back around and is headed down the street where I live. This time he gets out and starts to jog towards me. Since this is a huge college town, I just started screaming for attention. The guy was very big and definitely could have overpowered me. Thankfully, a few people immediately came out of their apartments. The guy jumped back into his car and speeds away. We reported the incident, and the police said that they actually had 2 other reports from the previous week of a similar car/behavior. A month later, there was a rape report in the same area. Man, people suck. I'm lucky I can scream really loud and that I caught people's attention to come to my rescue. I never walked home alone again, obviously. I did a U-turn in the middle of a 2-lane country road, since there wasn't any side roads for a few miles. When doing so, I thought the cars on the other lane were far enough that I could turn without them hitting me, or at least they would see me and slow down. Anyways, I U-turned and thought nothing of it until 5 minutes later when I parked in front of my home and I noticed a blue truck is stopping behind me. I wonder who this person is, so I step out of the car to see what he wants. Him. Everything all right? When you did your little U-turn up on X Road, you almost killed me. Me. Sorry. Him. You need to be careful. I would have died. Watch what you're doing. Me again. I understand. I'm sorry. Him. Well, all right then. He drove off, and I went home. Is this normal behavior? Should I be worried if he'll come back and slash my tires or something? When I was probably 13 to 14 years old, one of my best friends lived about a mile from my house, so naturally she and I used to walk to meet each other regularly. Once I went over there late, can't remember exactly why, but our other friend who also lived nearby had walked to meet us as well. We probably smoked a little and had a drink because at that age it's scandalous, fun, and exciting. Anyway, I walked back to my house late, by myself. It was probably about midnight. A man pulled up his car next to me and insisted I get in the car so that he could take me home. After I had explained what I was doing, something about his behavior told me he was not trying to be kind. I dismissed him several times while he trailed behind me, slowly in his car. Eventually, I did the classic pull out a phone and pretend to be talking on it trick, naming my exact location and describing his car while I faked going home by ducking into a nearby house's backyard. Sure enough, he sped off as soon as he heard me give his car's description. I still wonder to this day if I could have been hurt or murdered or something. Hopefully, it's more innocent than it sounds, but if not, I hope he didn't harm anyone else. This happened about 8 years ago when I was a senior in high school. My neighborhood was a very quiet and safe one, and I went to a small school. One day I had a study hall for the last block of the school day, so I decided to head out early, about 90 minutes before the final bell. As such, the roads weren't very crowded. I hopped into my ancient Ford and headed home to start getting ready for work. As I passed the grocery store near the mouth of my neighborhood, an unmarked white construction van pulled up behind me. I took a slight right towards my neighborhood and he followed. At first, I didn't find it strange because there were a lot of houses back here, but as I drove towards the back of the neighborhood and he didn't turn, I had my eye on him. My neighborhood was shaped like a giant horseshoe, with roads cutting through the middle. If the two entrances were the points of the horseshoe, my house was directly in the center of the U. Because of this, if you didn't live on my street or have business with someone on my street, there was no reason for you to be there. If you drove through, you'd be spit out back where you started. He followed me onto my street. I figured it was probable that he was just doing some work on one of my neighbor's houses, but I had a bad feeling in my gut, so I drove by my house without stopping, and he followed. Once I came out the other side of my street and he was still following, I knew he was probably intentionally tailing me. My gut sank and I white-knuckled my steering wheel. To confirm, I started taking random turns, about 3 to 4 at the time. He was still right behind me, never falling back. I decided I was going to drive to the police station since I obviously couldn't go home. At pretty much the exact moment I thought of that, he must have realized that I knew that he was up to something, because he hits the gas, his engine revved, and then he floored it out of the neighborhood. I breathed a sigh of relief and then went home. Thinking back, I still should have gone to the police station to file a report. But my dumb teenage brain was probably preoccupied with getting to work on time. I hate to think about what he wanted to do, and I'm extremely thankful that I was paying attention while I was driving. I mean, maybe I did misread the situation, but I guess I'll never know. Hello everyone, Grimm here. Thank you for making it to the end of another one of my videos. If you liked today's video, as I said at the start, please remember to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out. As always, I would like to leave you with my usual thoughts. Be safe wherever you are. Have an amazing night or day. And I'm Grimm. And I'm, well, signing off.